Hello, everybody. My name is Ricardo Cabrera, and I am the operations manager at the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Boulder County. And today we have Josh Stallings from CIRC. He is the North Regional Organizer, and he's going to be talking to us today about knowing our rights. This is knowing our rights as citizens, as individuals, and what to do in case the police comes or in case ICE visits us, and other basic information like that. So Josh, good morning. How are you today? Welcome.
Good morning. Excited to be here with y'all.
Excellent, Josh. Well, before we get to work, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as Ricardo said, I work with the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition as our North Regional Organizer. I live in Longmont, Colorado. I've been working here with CIRC for about 2 years now. And I've been really involved in the immigrant rights movement and working with people that are fighting their deportation cases for the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, I'm originally from like South Central Texas, just north of San Antonio, and love living in the state of Colorado and love working with the immigrant community here.
Excellent. So a lot of what we're going to be focusing on talking about today is about knowing your rights, especially if you're an immigrant or undocumented, because we still have rights, and there are some things that you can or cannot do in certain situations, and hopefully this will be helpful for you today. So, Josh, let's get going.
Awesome. So, all right, are you able to see that now, Ricardo?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Yeah, so as Ricardo said, in today's presentation, we're going to go over what your rights are in different situations with the police as well as with ICE, and really kind of noting the difference too between different law enforcement agencies and ICE. So the first thing that I want to start off saying is just that I'm not a lawyer. So nothing that I say should be taken as legal advice. More so we'll be presenting different options and suggestions you have for handling common situations, but really every situation is going to be different, and you are the only person that can, make that decision. If you have specific questions about specific scenarios, I would definitely recommend reaching out to a lawyer to ask that. This is also a workshop that you can be trained to give yourself to. So if you see this and you're like, my community needs this, I want to be the person that brings this to them, let me know, and we'd love to get you trained up too. And anything we can't answer in this presentation, or I guess feel free to reach out with questions. And if we can't, answer something in this presentation, we'd love to work with you to see if there is an answer that we can find together.
Good. So just so everybody knows, I am going to put Josh's information down here on the description as well as CIRC, and they are a great resource for any kind of questions that you have. They have a lot of programs and live people that can help you in difficult situations on the spot. So anyway, go ahead, Josh.
Perfect. All right, first question for you, Ricardo, is what is the difference between police, sheriff, the state patrol, and ICE?
Are you putting me on the spot?
I'm putting you on the spot. Since you're the one person live in the audience with you, I'm going to have some questions for you.
Yeah, okay, wow, okay, excellent. So as far as I know, and I really don't know, the difference between, the police is a municipal organization, and the sheriff is like a state or county it would be the sheriff, and then the state is a state group, and ICE is the federal immigration police, if you call it, if you will. How'd I do?
You did phenomenal. You are exactly right. Police are in the municipality, sheriff's in the county, state patrol cover the highways around the whole state, and then ICE, is a federal agency, and it's not a law enforcement agency in the way that the others are, that they're accountable to the community. ICE is only responsible for enforcing federal immigration and customs laws. And so, part of this presentation, we're going to be talking about, how those agencies, if they interact at all, how they interact, how they don't. Because really, at the end of the day, law enforcement agencies should not be collaborating with ICE. They're not doing the work of ICE. There's only one exception. There's a few there's some places in the country that have these things called 287G agreements that allow local law enforcement agents to kind of be an extension of ICE. Thankfully, we don't have any of that in Northern Colorado. I believe there's 2 counties in Southern Colorado that still have these agreements, but hopefully they will be gone soon.
So Josh, before you move on, I do have a question. So these guys are completely separate entities, even though they all look like police and they have their own tasks. So is it true, and this is a question, is it true that, for example, a state patrol police cannot give you a speeding ticket inside of the municipality of your town, just like a police officer that works in your town cannot give you a speeding ticket on a state highway, for example?
So I do know that like police, sheriffs, and state patrols, they will work together sometimes. So like if they need extra people, they can call in like backup. And I believe that state patrol can, issue tickets anywhere in the state since they have jurisdiction over the whole state.
Okay.
A police officer in Boulder, though, my understanding is that they couldn't like go to Longmont to like do work, but I'm not an expert on how those relationships work, so don't quote me.
Okay, yeah, so I guess the point was that they are different entities and they all have their tasks and assignments, and sometimes they don't overlap, just like ICE is separate from everything, and for the most part, they don't overlap with anybody.
Exactly, yeah. ICE should not be collaborating with these other agencies, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to give y'all just a quick like history lesson because I think it's really important to know where we came from and where we're headed. So in the mid 2000s, Colorado was actually one of the most anti-immigrant states in the country. Y'all may have heard in Arizona of SB 1070, the law in 2010 that created a show me your papers law and really allowed law enforcement agents to racially profile people who they suspected might not have documentation in the country. Colorado had actually passed a law just like that 4 years before Arizona in 2006. It was called SB 90. But we've come a long way since then. And thanks to the leadership of a number of immigrant folks in our community and testifying, and also like the legislators that were allies in this work, we've been able to become one of the more progressive states in the country and making sure that we have rights for undocumented folks. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides that just kind of outline that history a little bit. So here's what I just told you about. SB 90 became a law in 2006. In 2012, this is something that kind of, I guess, exists in one form or another still. Anytime that you're fingerprinted in the state of Colorado, that data is sent to a federal database that different agencies like the FBI and also ICE have access to. So that's just something important to know, that that information is accessible to ICE still today. So as I was mentioning, 2013, because of community leaders testifying and sharing their stories and sharing how much SB 90 broke trust between law enforcement and the community, we were able to repeal that show me your papers law. And then in the following year, up until that time, a lot of people were ending up in ICE custody because they would be arrested in the jail, and then the sheriff, after the person had served their time, or even if there like wasn't a charge, would just hold on to them until ICE could come pick them up. And so, the ACLU and CIRC and other organizations did a lot to show that this was a violation of your Fourth Amendment right. And then 2014 got all the sheriffs in the state to agree, we're not going to illegally detain people for ICE to come pick them up anymore. In 2019, this was finally put into law. No more ICE detainers. This law in 2019 also prohibited people from being arrested by, or prohibited probation officers from sharing information with ICE. And it also required that if you are arrested by local law enforcement, that if ICE wants to talk to you while you're in the jail, if they want to do an interview with you to try to get information from you, which they use to then incriminate you and put you in deportation proceedings, that the jail has to give you an advisement of your rights. They have to let you know that you have the right to refuse that call, that you have the right to remain silent. And then one last history thing that was really important is last year in 2020, the state of Colorado created a law that prohibits ICE from making arrests of people going to courthouses. So whether you're in the courthouse, you're on your way there, or on your way back home, ICE cannot make an arrest because our state believes that just like other sensitive locations like schools and hospitals, courthouses should be a place where everyone's safe to go. So whether you're a defendant or a victim, or you're there to testify as a witness, we should allow our judicial process to happen without ICE interfering. And so I really share all this just to show that like some of the rights that we have are some of the laws that have been passed, and also so that that like the laws are constantly changing. And if there's things that are unjust, we can fight to change those still. Okay, so now I want to give you just a brief update on what are the ways that sheriffs and local law enforcement can still work with ICE. Just to be clear, so sheriffs do have the right to share information with ICE still, like someone's release date. They can share information about when they're paying bail, sharing someone's address or upcoming court dates, probation or parole check-ins, or if you have like DUI classes or stuff that you're serving. And as I mentioned before, there are some 287G agreements that still exist.
So, right. So let me ask you this. So they can't ask you if you're documented or undocumented when you're in any of these things, like a DUI class or that. But they still share the information. Then ICE may or may not be there, but they still don't know your legal status, or is that a myth, or is that wrong?
So our local law enforcement, they really have no reason to know, like they shouldn't be asking what your status is. There's really no reason for them to need that information. Mm-hmm. I think the exception would be if you're the victim of a crime and you work with law enforcement to be able to share information, you could potentially be eligible for a U visa. So in that case, you would want to talk to law enforcement to have them authorize the U visa, and that would put you on a pathway to getting status. But other than that, law enforcement shouldn't be asking. And I think in a lot of places like in Boulder, they aren't asking anymore on their jail intake. There may be other counties that they still are asking, but there's no need for them to do that.
Okay, so that's important to know. I mean, in either of these cases, you're not required to tell anybody what your legal status is. You did mention the U visa, which I know very little about that. If you're a victim of a crime, or a domestic violence, you can get a pathway to citizenship because you were a victim. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Wow. Good.
Okay. So a question for you before going to the next slide is, what is the Constitution?
What is the Constitution? Yeah. It's a set of rights, unalienable rights that every citizen has in the United States.
Yeah. Awesome. So
is it the same as the Bill of Rights, or is it different?
That's a great question. So the Bill of Rights is within the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights and the amendments that are also added on to those initial 10 Bill of Rights, like those are the things that give us our rights within the Constitution.
Yes, and just to let me add to that, almost every country in the world has something like this. Not every country, but almost every country has a set that they may be called different, like human rights or citizen rights. In the United States, they call it the Bill of Rights, and they are, as you mentioned, a set of rules and rights that everybody has just because of the fact that we're alive in this country.
Exactly. And almost all of these amendments or these rights within the Constitution protect everyone with or without status. So we're going to talk about 3 of those rights today and how those apply for situations with both law enforcement and with ICE. Okay, so the first one is the 4th Amendment. This allows you to deny or to like you have the right to not be searched or have property seized unless law enforcement or authorities have probable cause or they have a judicial warrant. And this one, I remember my friend Sonia Marquez, who used to be the North Regional Organizer at CIRC, has some fun acronyms. This one I remember, I think of for, and then door. Like I have the right to keep my door closed, whether I'm in my car or my home, unless the officials have probable cause or judicial warrant. Okay, the next one is the Fifth Amendment. This is your right to remain silent. You probably heard this a lot of movies, right? I plead the Fifth. And so this one, I just remember I take my hand, 5. And then the Sixth Amendment is your right to know the charges against yourself, and the right to have an attorney, right? Like whether or not you already have an attorney that you're paying. I mean, I definitely don't. I would imagine most of us don't. But like, if you don't have an attorney, you still have the right to go out and get an attorney. And so you have the right to that counsel. And so this one, remember, you have your 6 here, and this is your little friend over here that can come over and help you out.
Right. And if you can't afford one, the court is supposed to assign one to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're in a criminal case, whether you're a citizen or not, you have the right to a public defender if you can't afford an attorney. There is a difference, in immigration court, you don't have the right to a public defender in immigration court. There are some nonprofits that provide pro bono support, but that's definitely a big need our country still has, is having more of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about how these are applied in different situations. But first, I want to give you a disclaimer and something that I think is really important for like just framing your rights. And that's that we cannot control the behavior of law enforcement, police, or ICE. But in exercising our rights, we can protect ourselves if our rights are violated. And so really, our rights are a tool, right? Like law enforcement isn't going to say, hey, you have the right to remain silent. They want, if they think you're guilty, they're going to want information, right? They're going to ask you questions. And so it's really your responsibility to know what your rights are and to then use them, to exercise them. They're just like a tool. It's only handy if you use it. Okay, so one definition for y'all. I use this word probable cause, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page of understanding what is probable cause. And so this refers to the requirement that police need to have adequate reason to arrest someone, to conduct a search or seize any property. And, there's not like, this is kind of a subjective thing. There's not a like strict qualification of what is considered probable cause and not. But the important thing is just to know is if something seems unreasonable, if it seems like law enforcement or ICE are jumping to conclusions, anything that you can document, in video or write down could be used to defend yourself later in court. And then the major exception to needing probable cause is consent, right? So if police or ICE even ask you if they can search your vehicle or come into your house and you say yes, you've given them the right to enter. And so probable cause is no longer needed. All right, okay, so the first lesson to learn that I just mentioned is like, record everything. We always have the right to record police by video or audio, as long as we're not interfering with them. The only times that you can't record are in courts and usually in jails as well. But one side note, just to make sure, is if you're in front of law enforcement or ICE and your phone is in your pocket, make sure that you're really clear about announcing what you're doing, because we do not want, someone to think that you're reaching for a weapon. So, being clear about that, announcing that you're taking out your phone and just moving very calmly is important. Law enforcement may ask you to stop recording. You have the right to record as long as you're not interfering. So if they ask you to move further back from the situation, I would suggest that you comply with that, and give them plenty of space, but you do not have to stop recording. You always have that right. Even if you're the victim? Yeah, if you're the victim, yes, but yeah, I guess, you may or may not be able to, depending on what the situation is. Right. And I guess victim is the wrong word. If you're the one being arrested, you could, or being
you can always, like you say I'm going to reach for my phone, and then you reach your phone and you can record it and set it aside or put it on the floor or something so it's not on the way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And so if you are in a situation where you are the person that's, directly interacting with police, or you have reason to believe that, you may be arrested too as a bystander, there is this cool app from the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, that you can download, where your video will automatically be emailed to them when you finish recording. So you don't have to worry about your video being deleted off your phone. I would say in the vast majority of cases, you're not going to need to worry about that. I think you'd be fine just recording straight to your phone, but this is a really handy app and it's good to know. All right, so let's talk about how those rights are applied to different situations. The first one we're going to talk about is if you're on the street, whether you're outside of court or jail or just any other situation on the street. So if an immigration agent approaches me outside of a court or jail or elsewhere on the street, do I have to answer their questions? What do you think, Ricardo?
I would say no. I mean, yeah, ooh, I got it right.
Correct. Yeah, you never have to speak with an immigration agent. You can invoke your Fifth Amendment right and remain silent. And so the magic words to remember in that situation is you can say, "I'm exercising the right to remain silent," and then just shut your mouth after that. And it needs to be an assertive right? Like you need to say, "I'm exercising the right to remain silent. I'm using my right to remain silent." You can't just stop talking. And it's also important to note that if you do say, "I'm going to use my right to remain silent," and then you start talking again afterwards, that undoes the whole thing, right? So you should then re-invoke your right to remain silent and then continue to practice it. Next question. Do I have to identify myself if an ICE agent asks who I am? What if they already know my name and say they have a warrant for my arrest? And what if they ask if I have a papers or if they even show me a picture of myself?
No.
Correct. No. Again, you can invoke your right to remain silent by using those magic words. "I'm exercising my right to remain silent." You definitely should not say anything about where you were born or how you entered the US to ICE, because ICE will then use this information against you if they put you in deportation proceedings. But it's also really important to note, never lie. Like if ICE asks you if this is you, don't say no, because that could also come back to hurt you. So you don't want to lie, but you do want to use your right to remain silent. Okay, what authority does ICE have to interrogate me?
I don't know that, but I would guess that they don't have any authority to interrogate you. That seems like a pretty aggressive move.
Yeah, that is a kind of a trick question. So sorry that I really sprung that one on you. So ICE has no more authority than any other person to ask questions of you. So, I mean, I could come up to you on the street, right, and be like, "Hey, Ricardo, I want to ask you some questions," right, and start talking to you. But I don't have the authority to detain you, right? And so, I think this is a tricky situation, right? Actually, here we're gonna get into this in the next slide, so I'll hold off on sharing that. Okay, so how do I know if I'm under arrest, and what should I do if they detain me?
Well, I would think handcuffs is the first sign, if you're under arrest. And if they detain me, I'll just keep my mouth shut, meaning, I'm not going to say as little as I can, and you could always say, "I'm going to use my my Fifth Amendment right to stay silent."
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, as you said, you're going to be placed in handcuffs if you're being arrested. And so if ICE is, talking to you, if they're you have the right to ask them, am I free to leave? And then if the answer is yes, you should leave right away. I wouldn't recommend, like running away from ICE. Like if they're asking you to stop, like that could elicit a bad response. But they should be telling you what you're charged with if you're being arrested, and then would be putting you in handcuffs.
So that's interesting. I mean, if I was to change a paradigm myself, the police officer, really in the end, they're your friends, and they try to help you. And then ICE, maybe a little bit in a different kind of way, but you can still be a nice person, whoever is in front of you, whether it's a police, a nice individual, or a stranger, and you can always say, I choose to remain silent because of my Fifth Amendment, not answer the questions, but be still polite, right, and kind. Like you say, don't run. And if there's any doubt in your mind, you can just ask, am I free to leave? And if they say yes, then, wish them a good day and move along. Because it sounds like their job is to try to extract information from you that they can use against you. And they're just doing their job. But you have your rights, and you don't have to answer or give them any information.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so one more slide here. Just additional to note, when you're enforcing your rights, you should use your Fifth Amendment right last, right? Because that's the last thing you want to say. So if you're being arrested, you can say, I do not consent to a search. That's your Fourth Amendment right. I need to speak with an attorney, your Sixth Amendment, and then I'm exercising my right to remain silent, your Fifth Amendment. And I'm gonna go ahead and show a quick video that kind of breaks down the Fifth Amendment for us. Let me just see. It's gonna be the best way to reshare. All right.
It was a normal afternoon. Judy and her friend Liz went out for lunch. The two met in elementary school and have been friends ever since. Liz is an American citizen, and while Judy was brought to the U.S. by her parents when she was only 4 years old, she is undocumented. Liz noticed two men that seemed to be following them, but she thought nothing of it. That's when the men called out Judy's name as if they were old friends. When she turned, the men approached fast. Judy had just been identified by ICE. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Stories like this happen every day and are happening now more than ever. ICE approaches people in the street, at work, in their car, or even in court. They often will not be in uniform. It's scary, but remember, we have rights. If you are stopped by authorities and don't know who they are, ask them to identify themselves. Then ask, am I free to go? If they say yes, walk away and do not answer any questions. In Judy's case, the agents told her she was not free to go. If this happens, do not resist or run away, and do not say anything, except I want to use my right to remain silent. I want to speak to a lawyer. Remember, you can ask to speak to a lawyer even if you don't have one. If the agents search your bag or your person, say, I do not agree to this search. They are looking for documents proving your immigration status. Witnesses have the right to film the interaction as long as they do not interrupt the arrest and they are transparent that they are filming. Judy was lucky. Even if you do everything right in a similar scenario, ICE may still arrest you. Another video in this series will help you understand your rights if you are arrested. After the encounter, Judy and Liz took notes about what happened, writing down as many details as they could remember. Be sure that you and your loved ones
right. So that was that video. Hopefully the video helped kind of like solidify some of the things we were talking about.
Yeah, and I didn't know that the ICE agents could be in civilian clothes. I always envisioned a full uniform individual representing ICE.
Yeah, and that's actually something that's really frustrating about the way ICE enforcement happens, is they often are in civilian clothes, and other times they'll wear like a vest that says police in really big letters, and then like ICE in small letters below it. So with law enforcement, anytime you ask for the officer to identify themselves, they should hand you a business card or tell you what their badge number is. And ICE, you should definitely ask the same thing, but oftentimes they don't comply, and they're not going to do it just like police will. So it really feels like they're, shady actors that don't want to admit everything they're up to. All right, cool. So now we want to talk about, what do you do in a traffic stop situation if you're driving your car and you get pulled over? And so this will focus more on law enforcement rather than ICE with this example. So if a police officer is interrogating me, do I have the same rights that I have with an ICE agent? What do you think, Ricardo?
I think, yeah, you have the same rights. I know they do ask you if it's a traffic stop, they ask you for insurance and registration, maybe your driver's license. But anything past that, you do have the right not to answer.
Yep, you're exactly right. So if you're driving, obviously you're going to need to show insurance and your license, registration. But otherwise, the only difference when working with law enforcement is that you are required to identify yourself with your name and your date of birth. So if you don't have a license, or maybe if you're on the street and you're stopped by law enforcement, you do need to identify yourself with those two things. Once you do that, though, you can then invoke your Fifth Amendment right and close your mouth. And so, all the same rights apply. Your Fourth Amendment as well, to not consent to a search or seizure. Your Sixth Amendment to speak with an attorney. Okay, so this is then jumping back to immigration. So let's say that you were arrested by police because you had some kind of driving infraction. If ICE then finds out and they call the jail to ask for an interview with you, do you have to speak to that immigration agent over the phone?
No.
Correct. Yeah, you can use your Sixth Amendment right. I want to talk to my lawyer. And then your Fifth Amendment, I'm exercising my right to remain silent.
So Josh, let me ask you this. When do you have to talk to them? So far we've pretty much said you don't have to say anything. So at some point, I'm assuming at some point you do have to say something, even if you talk to a lawyer or after you spoke with the lawyer. Is there a time when you do actually legally by law have to answer a question?
It's a good question. I guess if you're in court, but really I think that's the key of having a lawyer, right? You want your lawyer to tell you when you should respond and not be baited into answering questions that you don't need to.
Yeah, I guess the lawyer speaks for you. If you have one, then he'll speak for you. And I do know from other experiences that being a courtroom and speaking, about legal issues, it's a professional profession, right? So us as citizens, we really don't know the rules of the game. It's like putting a basketball player in a soccer court and asking him to play. It just doesn't happen, and you're going to make mistakes because of things that you don't know. So, and I can see why it's important then not to say anything and talk to a lawyer. So when you do say something, it's appropriate and you're not hurting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're gonna jump onto our third scenario about talking about what are your rights if you're in your home. So what should I do if ICE arrives to my home? What do you think?
I would not let him into the house. Unless they have a warrant, then I would say, be polite and say, you can't come into my house.
Yep, you are exactly right. So you can ask for an arrest or search warrant. You do not have to open the door. And so that's, as you said, where you can use your Fourth Amendment right.
So you don't even have to open the door. So let me ask you this. When an ICE official comes to your door, do they have to identify themselves at that point as ICE?
They should.
Well, let me tell you why I ask. It's a trick question. I mean, it's kind of a trick question because in the case of an emergency, when a police officer shows up and say they need to evacuate your building and they're trying to help you get out of a fire or something like that, or a flood. This happened actually in 2013. The police was going knocking door to door to get people to evacuate, and individuals weren't opening the door because they were afraid, which is your right not to open the door. But in this case, it was a life or death situation, not an ICE raid.
Yeah, they should identify themselves. I don't know if they're actually required to comply by that in law, or if they do, because I have heard of scenarios where they are deceptive, not necessarily in straight up line like this. So I can't answer that question confidently. Mm-hmm. But what I can say is, asking for the warrant will be really important because ICE doesn't typically carry a warrant that's signed by a judge for arresting someone or for searching someone's home or property. What they typically carry is this thing called a warrant for arrest of alien. Obviously, it's a terrible name, but that's the document they carry, and it just has the space for an ICE official to sign. It doesn't have any space for a judge to sign. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't have the same weight of law that a judicial warrant would have.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and show us another video that will really teach you better how to respond to the scenario than what I'll say in words. So let's do a new share.
It was 5:30 a.m. when ICE came to Esther's apartment. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The agents lied to Esther, saying they were police officers investigating a crime and her husband, Alexei, was a potential witness. "Is Alexei home?" they asked innocently. Now Esther's gut told her she should cooperate, but she remembered something she'd heard on the radio. ICE had been making early morning sweeps using tricks like this to get people to open their doors. Esther remembered she had rights. ICE may try similar tricks at your home. They may say they're looking for a friend, relative, or roommate. But do not be fooled, and do not open the door. Instead, remain calm and be polite. Tell the agents that you'd like to see a warrant and their ID. Ask them to slip these documents under the door or hold them up to the peephole. Without a warrant signed by a judge, ICE is not allowed to enter or search your home. ICE usually won't have a warrant, but they may lie and say they do or show you something else that looks official. So look carefully and take pictures of whatever they show you. If they refuse to share any of these documents, then ask them for their card and contact information. Do not show the agents anything or say anything except, "I do not consent for you to enter my home. I do not want to talk to you without a lawyer present. please leave. Now, ICE won't always listen to you and may enter your home using force. But saying these things might help you in court, even if the agents don't listen. The other videos in this series will help you understand your rights if ICE enters your home or arrests you. Esther and Alexei knew their rights, and the officers left. This is all scary, but remember, we have rights. After an encounter with ICE, take notes about what happened, writing down as many details as you can remember. This information might be helpful in future immigration proceedings. It's important that you and your loved ones are prepared for encounters with ICE, and that you have a plan for what to do if one of you is arrested, including information about who to call. If ICE comes...
All right, so we will watch one more video a little bit later in the presentation. I'll give us those last details on what to do after an arrest. But yeah, I think that video actually, I'm glad we watched that because that answered our question, Ricardo.
Right, it has to be a judge that's signing it.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Okay, so just a quick review. As we noted, ask for that search or arrest warrant. It can either be held up to a window or it can be passed, under a door, maybe through a mail slot. And when you're looking at that warrant, it should include your full name spelled correctly. It should, as spelled on your birth certificate, it should have the current date, and it needs to have that judge's signature. If it's a search warrant, it should have a description of the house that's being searched and maybe even where specifically in the house, the address, or if it's like a vehicle, it should have a description of the vehicle. And once again, it has to be signed by a judge.
And if any of the information is wrong, you don't have, you can go back and say, that's not me, that's not my address, that's not my car. And then they can't search you.
Correct, yeah, it's no longer valid if any of the
Right, and a misspelling counts as wrong. So they may have technically the right name, but there is a misspelling on a name or on a street address. You can still say that's not the correct name or street address.
Yep, exactly. So a few examples, I'm not sure how well y'all can see these, but this is a search warrant. And so at the bottom of this warrant, there's a judge's signature. And are you able to see it okay, Ricardo?
Not the text, but it's okay. I think we get the gist of it.
Okay. Yeah, and in the middle of the document, it has an actual description of what's being searched. It's that like bolded section. So then the next slide, arrest warrant. Once again, there's a judge's signature at the bottom, it says judge under the line. And this has, in kind of the middle of the document, if you can see where my mouse is, it has the name of the person and an actual physical description of what this person looks like. Mm-hmm. Their racial makeup, their height, their approximate weight, and then color their eyes and their hair. So it's very clear who they're intending to arrest. And then there's also a date right above the judge's signature. Mm-hmm. And then this is one of the documents that ICE uses, the warrant for arrest of alien, as they call it. And so on this document, there's no places for a judge's signature, just signature of authorized immigration officer. And you don't have the same, like place to put in the actual description or address, that you find on those other documents. You just have these pre-checked boxes, right? So it's a much different thing. And yeah, so as I had said before, in the vast majority of cases, ICE will have that I-200 or warrant for arrest of alien. These are not constitutionally compliant. And so with this warrant alone, you do not need to open your door. And ICE does not have the authority to search your home or open your door and make the arrest. So at the beginning, when we were talking about history, we mentioned something called ICE holds or ICE detainers. These should not be being used anymore in the state of Colorado. But I think it's still important, just in case you are ever to hear a sheriff say that there's an ICE hold, that should not be happening, and you need to know to call for help. But this is what that document looks like. And it's a document that ICE would send to jails, to sheriffs, when they heard of someone being detained. And they still do it, but now just the sheriffs, are not allowed to comply with those orders from ICE. Yeah, that's everything that I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one other thing on this slide that's important to note is that because of those ICE holds under the Obama administration, over 2 million people were deported, right? And that's just something important for us, is like, we really want to make sure that we continue to create more policies that make sure that ICE enforcement and law enforcement are not one and the same, and that there's a very strong division between the two of those. And just once again, whether your house is being searched, your car, your pockets, or even your purse or wallet, all those things are considered searches. And so you always have that Fourth Amendment right. I do not consent to a search. Okay, we'll go through this part really fast, but this is some information to know if you ever are arrested, just what your rights are in that situation. So, can a jail dissuade or deny someone their right to pay bond if they have an immigration hold?
I don't know on this one, but my guess is that I would guess no, just because every other answer has been no, but I really don't know. I have no idea.
Exactly, yeah. So first of all, they shouldn't be, listening to immigration holds at all anymore. So that would be the first red flag. But second, yeah, everyone has the right to pay bail if the court gives them bail. And it is your decision whether or not to pay bail. No one else can make that decision for you. This is just important to note, because in the past, there has been times where people in the jail have dissuaded someone from paying their bail because they had an immigration hold, and told them, sometimes I think it was even good intentions, right? Like the jail person was trying to say, if you pay, you might be arrested by ICE and you're going to lose your bail money. But what's important to know is that as of 2017, it's illegal now for sheriffs to dissuade you from paying your bail. And if you do pay bail from a jail and then are detained by ICE or arrested and you miss your court date, you can still get that bail money back. There's a process for getting that bail money back. All right, so that's the ICE detainer again. And so it would be hard for me to imagine that you'd be in a situation where someone's insisting there's an immigration hold because of the law today. But if that does happen, the magic words you can use are, if the courts have given me a bond, I have the right to pay it, and no one can interfere with that right. And if they insist that there's an immigration hold, that's not valid. So you can ask to see an arrest warrant, and then you can, strongly proclaim immigration holds violate the Constitution, and you can be sued for violating my rights under the Fourth Amendment. And so if you're ever in this context, we'll share at the very end of this presentation the number for the Colorado Rapid Response Network. I would highly recommend reaching out and calling that network and getting support right away, because that's not something that we want to sit around and fiddle with. Like, there's other people that can step in and support to make sure that the jail is honoring your rights. Okay, cool. If there's not any questions, I'm going to move on with just a couple of last pieces of advice.
Mm-hmm.
So from the National Immigration Law Center, just before signing any paper, it's always important to consult with your lawyer to make sure you know what you're doing and what you're signing. If you have legal authorization to be in the country, whether that's DACA or a green card, it's important to carry those documents with you. If you do not have any visa or authorization to be in the country, I I would not recommend, carrying your foreign passport with you when you don't have to. Obviously, there may be some times where you need it, but that is information that could be used by ICE if they were to arrest you, to prosecute you, to give them like probable cause. And then a few other pieces. It's good to like have a backup plan if something does happen. I know it's like hard to think about, what would you do if you were arrested by ICE, but I think just thinking it through logically when you're not under that pressure can help you have the right response if that were to ever happen. So make sure that you have some important phone numbers memorized. You can go to this link to create a family plan, which would make sure that you have a plan. It would kind of talk you through the different steps of like making sure there's something set up for your children, for like important property, possessions, items, and then fighting your legal case. And if you ever have a loved one that is detained, this phone number here for the Executive Office of Immigration Review is the number that you can call to figure out where they're detained. And so I'm going to play one last video for us that just shares information from the ACLU about what to do if you are arrested, and then these steps that you can take afterwards.
But remember, we have rights. If you are arrested by ICE, remain silent. Ask to speak to a lawyer even if you don't have one. If you witness ICE making an arrest, it is your right to document what you see by taking notes or videotaping. Do not interrupt the arrest, but you have the right to ask for identification and badge numbers. If you've been arrested, do not sign anything. Keep whatever information ICE gives you. They will have important information for your family. After ICE arrests you, they will likely take you to an ICE office and ask you more questions before starting a deportation case against you and deciding whether or not to send you to a detention facility. Remember, do not say anything without a lawyer present. You can ask to speak to a lawyer even if you don't have one. Within about a day, loved ones will be able to search for your location at the website included below. This is all scary, but remember, we have rights. Be sure that you and your loved ones are prepared for encounters with ICE and that you have a plan for what to do if one of you is arrested, including information about who you should call. If you are arrested by ICE, remember, you have rights. Remain silent. Ask to speak to a lawyer. Do not sign anything. If a loved one is arrested, you should be able to locate them at locator.ice.gov.
All right, thank you, ACLU. Cool, so my parting thoughts are just knowing that even if you are arrested, you have the right to due process and to a lawyer. And know that there actually are some forms of immigration relief that you can't even apply for or can't even fight until you're put in removal proceedings. And so there still is hope. And as we mentioned, the Colorado Rapid Response Network, this is that number. Definitely put it in your phone, please. Share it with your friends. And as we said at the very beginning, your rights are a tool. They're not going to do you any good unless you know how to exercise and use them. So thank you so much for your time today. Ricardo, are there any parting questions from your side?
Yeah, I have one question for you. Let me just stop sharing here. Here we go. Hi, we're back. Yeah, so that number you put in at the end, this is like a catch-all number, right? So if you have a question, if there's an ongoing event, or if you're arrested and you say, can I speak with a lawyer, and you don't have one, you could use this number to help anything get started to help you in any situation you are. Is that accurate?
That's correct, yeah. So if you're witnessing something live like a raid, or there's emergency situation where you've gone to the jail and they're denying your bail, like call that and press option 1 and talk to someone live. If you want to call about a situation that happened in the past, where like a raid is already done and you need support, then you can call that number and press option 2, and someone will follow up within 3 business days.
Excellent. So, everybody just realize that, these things are scary. I mean, I was nervous just watching this, to think that this could happen to anybody. Whether you're undocumented or not, your rights still apply. And of course, the focus here is for all of us, or all the individuals that are undocumented. And we don't know. So hopefully we have all learned something from here, and to know that, the rules of this game, the legal rules of this game are also meant to protect us, as well as, the officers. They have their job to do, and they're going to try to do it as well as they can. And, the other side of that coin is that we have our rights, and we need to use them as well as we can to be able to, not put ourselves in any more danger that we may not be in any danger, and then we put ourselves in there by, not exercising our rights. So, this is really great information, Josh. So thank you very much for sharing. And if you do you have anything else to add?
No, don't hesitate to reach out and contact us with any questions. But yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to learn, and use your rights.
All right, use your rights. Thank you, everybody. Until next time.